You know what hurts more than physical pain? It's when the person you gave your whole life to looks you in the eye and tells you that someone else deserves happiness more than you do. That your suffering doesn't matter because it's not convenient for them. That's what betrayal really feels like. Not a knife in the back, but a slow, deliberate suffocation of your worth as a human being. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. My name is Dakota Evans, and I'm 57 years old. I live in a small rental apartment in Sacramento, California, where the summer heat creeps through thin walls and the neighbors' arguments echo through paper-thin floors. This isn't where I thought I'd be at this stage of my life. 20 years ago, I owned a beautiful house with a garden where I grew tomatoes and roses. I had a husband who loved me, a son I was proud of, and dreams of grandchildren playing in that same garden. But life has a way of stripping you down to nothing, piece by piece, until you're left staring at the skeleton of who you used to be. My husband David died of cancer when Kevin was 19. The medical bills ate through our savings like acid through metal. I sold the house, downsized, worked double shifts as a hospital administrator just to keep Kevin in college. I told myself it was temporary, that once he graduated, got established, maybe got married, we'd rebuild what we lost together. That was my first mistake, believing that sacrifice creates gratitude instead of entitlement. Kevin did well for himself. Computer engineering, then an MBA, then a job at a tech startup that went public 3 years later. He bought a house in Palo Alto, one of those sleek, modern things that looks like a glass box but costs $3 million. He married Stella, a corporate lawyer whose family owns half of Marin County. They had the kind of wedding that gets featured in magazines, where the flowers alone cost more than I made in 6 months. I was proud of him. Even when the visits became phone calls, and the phone calls became texts, and the texts became awkward interactions on holidays, I told myself this was normal. This was what happened when children grew up and became successful. They didn't need their mothers cluttering up their pristine lives with reminders of struggle and loss. But I needed him. God. How I needed him. It started with my hip 3 years ago. A dull ache that I ignored because I couldn't afford to acknowledge it. Hospital work meant long hours on my feet and health insurance that covered the bare minimum. The ache became pain. The pain became agony. And the agony became a constant companion that followed me through every waking moment. I went to the free clinic first, then to a specialist who told me I needed hip replacement surgery, both hips actually, and that without it, I'd be in a wheelchair within 2 years. The surgery would cost $60,000. My insurance would cover half, eventually, after a lengthy approval process that could take up to 18 months. In the meantime, I could manage with pain medication and physical therapy. Manage. As if managing was living. I called Kevin that night. It was the first time I'd asked him for help since he graduated college. "Mom, $60,000 is a lot of money," he said. And I could hear Stella's voice in the background. Something about dinner plans. "And honestly, you're being a little dramatic. People live with hip pain all the time. Have you tried yoga?" Yoga, while I could barely stand long enough to make myself a sandwich. "Kevin, I can barely walk. I had to take unpaid leave from work because I can't—" "Look, Mom, I know it's hard, but Stella and I have our own financial obligations right now. We're looking at maybe buying a vacation place in Tahoe, and with the market the way it is." A vacation place in Tahoe. While his mother was dissolving Vicodin in her morning coffee just to make it through the day. That conversation happened on a Tuesday. On Friday, I saw the photos on Stella's Instagram. Her mother, Helen, posing in a Beverly Hills plastic surgeon's office, showing off her new face. The caption read, "Thanks to my amazing son-in-law for making this dream come true, feeling 20 years younger. Blessed our family that knew me." I stared at that photo for 20 minutes. Helen Rodriguez, 53 years old, tennis player, country club member, owner of 2 homes and a successful interior design business, getting a $30,000 facelift courtesy of my son, the same son who told me that people live with hip pain all the time. I called him immediately. "Kevin, I saw Helen's post." Silence. Then, "Mom, that's different." Different how? She's been really struggling with her self-esteem since the divorce. She deserves to feel good about herself. And I don't deserve to walk? Mom, you're being unfair. It's not the same thing at all. But it was exactly the same thing. It was about priorities. It was about who mattered and who didn't. It was about the fact that my son had $30,000 to spend on making his mother-in-law feel pretty, but not a penny to help his own mother walk without screaming. I hung up the phone and sat in my small kitchen, looking out at the parking lot where broken glass glittered like cruel stars. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't thinking about the pain in my hips. I was thinking about something much sharper, much cleaner. I was thinking about what my son had just taught me about family loyalty, about how love was conditional, about how sacrifice was forgotten the moment it became inconvenient. And I was thinking about what I was going to do with that lesson. The next morning, I woke up with something I hadn't felt in months: clarity. The fog of pain medication and self-pity had lifted, replaced by a cold, sharp focus that cut through everything like a blade. I made coffee, real coffee, not the instant garbage I'd been drinking to save money, and sat down at my kitchen table with a notebook. At the top of the first page, I wrote, "What I know about my son." Kevin loved his image. Everything about his life was curated for maximum impression: the house, the car, the wife, the social media presence that showed him at charity galas and tech conferences. He'd built his identity around being successful, generous, and family-oriented. The kind of man who posted Father's Day tributes to his dead father and Mother's Day messages about how I was his inspiration. All lies, of course, but lies that his friends, colleagues, and social circle believed completely. I understood something that morning that I'd been too hurt and desperate to see before. My son's greatest fear wasn't losing money, or even losing Stella. It was losing the story he told about himself, the story where he was the hero, the good son, the man who'd risen above his humble beginnings to become someone important. What would happen to that story if people knew the truth? I spent the morning making phone calls. Not to ask for help, I was done begging, but to gather information. I called Kevin's old college friends, his co-workers, people who knew him from the country club where he and Stella played tennis. Casual conversations, catching up, asking about their families, their lives. "Oh, Dakota, we see Kevin all the time at the foundation events," said Jennifer Walsh, whose husband worked at the same firm. "He's always talking about you, how proud he is of how strong you are. He said you were handling your health issues like a champion." Handling my health issues like a champion, while I was rationing pain pills and walking with a cane I'd bought at a thrift store. "He mentioned you were considering some kind of surgery," Jennifer continued, "but that you were being really brave about waiting for the right time?" The right time. As if there was ever a right time to live in agony. Every conversation was the same. Kevin had been telling people that I was fine, that I was toughing it out, that I was too proud to accept help. He'd painted himself as the concerned son with the stubborn mother who refused to let him contribute to her medical expenses. More lies, but effective ones. By noon, I had a complete picture of my son's social and professional network. I knew who respected him, who envied him, who would be most interested in knowing the truth about his character. I also knew exactly how much his reputation was worth to him. Everything. I spent the afternoon documenting everything. Screenshots of Stella's Instagram posts showing their lavish lifestyle. Photos of Helen's surgery recovery, where she thanked her amazing son-in-law repeatedly. Bank records showing my own financial struggles. Medical bills I couldn't pay. The letter from the surgeon explaining why I needed the surgery urgently. I also wrote down every conversation I'd had with Kevin over the past 2 years. Every time he'd brushed off my concerns. Every excuse he'd made. Every time he'd changed the subject when I mentioned my pain. I had a good memory for humiliation, but I wasn't ready to act yet. I needed one more piece of the puzzle. That piece came 3 days later, in the form of my neighbor, Cora Hutchins. Cora was 62, divorced, and had been living in the apartment next to mine for 5 years. She was one of those women who'd raised 4 kids on her own, worked 2 jobs most of her adult life, and had opinions about everything from local politics to the proper way to fold fitted sheets. She was also the only person who'd noticed that I was struggling. "Dakota, honey, you look terrible," she said, standing in my doorway with a casserole dish. "And don't tell me you're fine, because I can hear you crying through these paper-thin walls." I let her in because I was tired of being alone with my anger. She sat at my kitchen table, looked around at the pill bottles and medical bills scattered across the counter, and asked the question no one else had bothered to ask. "What do you need?" I told her everything. Not the sanitized version I'd been giving people, but the truth. The pain that woke me up every night. The fact that I'd lost my job because I could no longer do it. The humiliation of asking my successful son for help and being told that his mother-in-law's vanity was more important than my mobility. Cora listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You know what pisses me off most about this?" she finally said. "It's not that your son is selfish. Lots of kids are selfish. It's that he's a coward. He could have just said he didn't want to help you, but instead he's out there lying about it, making himself look good while you suffer." She was right. The selfishness I could have forgiven, eventually. But the lies, the way he'd stolen my narrative and twisted it to make himself the victim of my stubbornness, that was unforgivable. "What are you going to do about it?" Cora asked. "I don't know yet, but I was lying. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I just wasn't sure I was ready to burn every bridge to do it." Cora made the decision for me. "I'm starting a GoFundMe," she announced. "Tonight. And I'm going to tell the truth about what's happening here." "Cora, no. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You're protecting a son who wouldn't piss on you if you were on fire. That stops now." She was already pulling out her phone, typing rapidly. "What's your son's full name? And his wife's? I want to make sure people know exactly who we're talking about." I could have stopped her. Should have stopped her. But as I watched her fingers moving across the screen, creating the post that would change everything, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation. Dakota Evans is a 57-year-old woman who worked double shifts for 20 years to put her son through college, Cora typed, reading aloud as she wrote. She sold her house to pay for his education and her husband's cancer treatment. Now she needs hip replacement surgery and can't afford it, while her son, Kevin Evans of Palo Alto, just paid for his mother-in-law's cosmetic surgery. Share this story. Help us show Dakota that real family isn't about blood. It's about showing up when it matters. She attached photos I'd shown her. Me with my cane, struggling to get up from a chair. The medical bills scattered across my table. And then, because Cora was nothing if not thorough, screenshots from Stella's Instagram showing their wealth. "Cora, this will destroy him." She looked at me with eyes that had seen too much of the world's cruelty to have patience for its hypocrisies. Good. Some people need to be destroyed. Maybe that's the only way they learn what matters. She hit publish before I could say another word. Within an hour, the post had 50 shares. Within 6 hours, it had 500. By the next morning, it had gone viral in the way that only stories about family betrayal can go viral. Shared by angry mothers, disappointed children, and everyone who'd ever felt abandoned by someone they'd sacrificed for. The donations started small. $5, $10, $20. But they kept coming. Strangers who saw their own stories reflected in mine. People who understood what it meant to be discarded after a lifetime of giving. More importantly, the comments started coming. And every single one of them mentioned Kevin by name. My phone started ringing that afternoon. Kevin, of course, but I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to hear his voice yet. I wanted to watch the fire spread first. Wanted to see how much of his carefully constructed image would survive the heat. I had my answer by evening. The GoFundMe had raised $12,000 in less than 24 hours, but that wasn't the real victory. The real victory was watching my son's reputation burn down around him, one share at a time. The surgery was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Dr. Patricia Reeves, the orthopedic surgeon who'd been waiting 18 months for my insurance approval, suddenly had an opening when the GoFundMe hit $45,000. Funny how money made medical miracles possible. "Mrs. Evans, I have to ask," she said during our pre-op consultation. The media attention around your case. Are you comfortable with that level of exposure? I was more than comfortable. I was thriving. The story had grown legs, as they say. Local news stations picked it up first, then regional outlets, then national blogs that specialized in family drama and social justice. The comment section of every article was a battleground between people defending Kevin, we don't know the whole story, and people calling for his head. What kind of monster abandons his mother? But the most devastating coverage came from an unexpected source. Kevin's own professional network. Someone had leaked information about his financial situation to a tech industry blog. Suddenly, everyone knew exactly how much money Kevin Evans made, how much his house was worth, how much he'd spent on Helen's surgery. The numbers were stark, undeniable, and utterly damning. Tech CEOs started distancing themselves from him publicly. The charity board he served on quietly asked him to step down. His company, facing pressure from employees who were sharing the story internally, suggested he take a leave of absence until the situation resolved itself. Kevin called me 47 times in 3 days. I answered on the 48th call. Mom, please. You have to make this stop. His voice was different, smaller, desperate. The confident corporate executive was gone, replaced by a frightened boy who'd finally realized that actions had consequences. Stop what, Kevin? The posts, the interviews, all of it. People are calling me a monster. They're saying I hate my own mother. Don't you? Silence. Then, Mom, that's not, I never meant. You paid $30,000 for Helen's facelift while I was living on oatmeal and generic pain pills. What would you call that? It wasn't like that. You're making it sound. I'm not making it sound like anything. I'm telling people exactly what happened. If you don't like how it sounds, maybe you should have thought about that before you did it. Mom, please. Stella's family is furious. Her father is threatening to pull his investment from our startup. My career is... I hung up. Let me be clear about something. I felt nothing. No guilt, no sadness, no maternal instinct to protect the child I'd raised. Those feelings had died the day Kevin chose Helen's vanity over my ability to walk. What remained was a cold satisfaction watching him learn what abandonment felt like. The surgery went perfectly. Bilateral hip replacement, 6 hours under anesthesia, and when I woke up, I was surrounded by flowers and cards from strangers who'd followed my story. Cora was there, of course, along with 3 other neighbors I barely knew, but who'd been quietly watching out for me for months. Kevin was not there. Neither was Stella. Not that I'd expected them. But Donald Morrison was there. I met Donald in the rehabilitation center 2 weeks after surgery. He was 71, a retired electrician who'd suffered a stroke 8 months earlier that left him with limited mobility on his right side. He had thick white hair, kind eyes, and hands that still bore the calluses of a man who'd worked with his hands his entire life. "You're the lady from the news," he said the first day I saw him struggling with his physical therapy exercises. "I'm the lady who got tired of being treated like garbage by her family," I corrected. He laughed. A real laugh, not the polite kind people gave when they didn't know what else to do. "Good for you. My daughters keep asking if I saw your story. They're worried I'm going to start a GoFundMe if they don't visit me enough. Are they good to you? They're the best daughters a man could ask for. Lost their mother 2 years ago, and they've been taking care of their old man ever since. Sometimes I think they care too much." I couldn't imagine what that felt like. Donald and I became friends gradually, the way lonely people do when they recognize something familiar in each other's faces. Not the loneliness. His daughters visited constantly, but the understanding that life could change everything in an instant, that the body you'd trusted for decades could betray you, leaving you dependent on others in ways you'd never imagined. The difference was that Donald's others had shown up. Mine had not. "What are you going to do when you get out of here?" he asked one afternoon as we worked on our exercises side by side. "I don't know. Go back to my apartment, I guess. Try to find work that doesn't require standing all day." That sounds lonely. It was lonely. But lonely was better than being disappointed by people who were supposed to love you. "What about you?" "My daughters want me to move in with one of them. Sarah's got a mother-in-law suite and Emma's got a guest house. They're fighting over who gets to take care of me. He shook his head with fond exasperation. Good problems to have, I suppose. Good problems. I tried to remember what those felt like. 3 months into rehabilitation, Donald introduced me to his daughters. Sarah was 45, a nurse with 2 teenage boys and a husband who coached Little League. Emma was 42, a teacher with 3 young children and a husband who owned a small construction company. They were the kind of women who brought homemade cookies to their father's therapy sessions and argued about whose turn it was to drive him to appointments. They welcomed me into their family orbit without question or judgment. Sarah brought me soup when I had a cold. Emma's youngest daughter made me a drawing of flowers that I taped to my bathroom mirror. They included me in birthday celebrations and holiday plans as if I'd always been there. It was what family was supposed to feel like. Meanwhile, my real family was imploding spectacularly. The GoFundMe had raised $68,000 by the time I finished rehabilitation. The excess money went to other people in similar situations: elderly parents abandoned by successful children, families facing medical bankruptcies, people whose own children had forgotten what sacrifice looked like. I made sure every donation was publicized, every recipient was interviewed, every story was tied back to the original narrative about Kevin and his priorities. The gift that kept on giving. Kevin's life was unraveling with surgical precision. The startup he'd invested in collapsed when Helen's family withdrew their backing. His and Stella's house went on the market, though at their price point in Palo Alto, it wasn't moving quickly. Stella had moved back in with her parents, the same parents whose finances Kevin had prioritized over his mother's health. Helen, meanwhile, had become a social media pariah. Her Instagram posts about her amazing son-in-law had been screenshot and shared thousands of times, usually with comments about her selfishness and vanity. She'd made her profile private, then deleted it entirely when people started showing up at her tennis club to confront her. The irony was delicious. Helen had gotten her facelift to feel better about herself, but now she couldn't show her face anywhere without being recognized as the woman whose vanity had cost a son his mother. On the evening of my final rehabilitation session, as I walked unassisted to the parking lot for the first time in 3 years, Donald caught up with me. "Dakota, wait." I turned, and he was standing there with a small velvet box in his hands. "I know this might seem fast, and I know you've got every reason not to trust family anymore, but..." He opened the box, revealing a simple gold band with a small diamond. "Would you consider being part of mine?" I looked at this kind man who'd watched me rebuild myself from nothing, who'd introduced me to daughters who treated me better than my own son ever had, who was offering me something I'd thought was lost forever, a place where I belonged. "Donald, You don't have to answer now, but Sarah and Emma, they love you already. The grandkids ask about you every day. We're not perfect, but we show up for each other. Always. Show up for each other. Always." I thought about Kevin, probably sitting in his empty house, wondering how his perfect life had crumbled so completely. I thought about Stella, learning that money and status were meaningless when your husband's reputation was destroyed. I thought about Helen, hiding from the consequences of her selfishness. Then I looked at Donald, at his hopeful face and calloused hands, at the family who'd embraced me without expecting anything in return. "Yes," I said. "Yes, I want to be part of your family." And for the first time in years, I smiled without calculating the cost. The dinner to celebrate Donald's recovery was held at Sarah's house on a Saturday evening in October. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke and dying leaves, and Sarah's backyard was strung with warm white lights that cast everything in a golden glow. I wore a new dress, navy blue with small flowers, bought with money I'd earned from my own choices rather than begged for from ungrateful children. My hair was styled, my nails were done, and for the first time in years, I felt like a woman rather than a burden. Donald's family had prepared a feast. Sarah's husband, Mike, grilled steaks and salmon, while Emma made her famous garlic mashed potatoes and roasted vegetables. The grandchildren, ranging from 5 to 17, set the table with the kind of chaotic enthusiasm that only comes from kids who feel completely secure in their family's love. "Dakota, you sit here," announced Emma's youngest, Lily, patting the chair next to hers. "I made you a special place card. It was a piece of construction paper folded in half with Dakota, almost grandma, written in purple crayon and decorated with stick figures holding hands. Almost grandma. The words hit me harder than I'd expected. Kevin had never given me grandchildren. He and Stella had been waiting for the right time for 8 years, which I now understood meant they'd never wanted children at all. Too messy, too expensive, too disruptive to their carefully curated lifestyle. But here I was, surrounded by children who'd already claimed me as family, who fought over who got to sit next to me at dinner and show me their latest art projects. "Speech, speech," called out Emma's oldest, Jake, as we raised our glasses of wine and sparkling cider. Donald stood, his right hand still showing slight tremors from the stroke, but his voice steady and strong. "A year ago, I thought my story was ending. I couldn't move half my body, couldn't remember simple words, couldn't see how I'd ever be the man my family needed me to be." He looked around the table at his daughters, his sons-in-law, his grandchildren, all listening with the kind of attention that only comes from genuine love. But this family, my family, they didn't let me give up. They showed up every day, even when I was difficult, even when I was scared, even when I pushed them away because I was embarrassed about needing help. His eyes found mine across the table. And then I met someone else who was fighting her own battles, someone who'd been abandoned by the people who should have shown up for her. Someone who taught me that family isn't just about who you're born to. It's about who chooses to stay. The tears came then, unexpected and unwelcome. I'd spent months building walls around my emotions, constructing barriers of cold anger and calculated revenge. But sitting in that backyard, surrounded by people who'd chosen to love me without conditions or expectations, the walls cracked. "Dakota," Donald continued, "you've shown me what real strength looks like. Not the kind that never bends, but the kind that breaks and rebuilds itself stronger. You've survived betrayal that would have destroyed lesser people, and somehow you've kept your heart open enough to let us love you." He moved around the table toward me, that small velvet box appearing in his hands again. "So I'm asking again, in front of all the people who matter most to me, Dakota Evans, will you marry me? Will you let us be your family for real?" The children were bouncing in their seats with excitement. Sarah was crying openly. Emma was recording everything on her phone. Mike was grinning like he'd known this was coming all along. I looked at these faces, these people who'd embraced me completely, and made my choice. "Yes," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Yes, I want to be part of this family." The ring slid onto my finger perfectly, as if it had been waiting for me all along. The children cheered, the adults applauded, and for a moment, I forgot about Kevin entirely. But only for a moment. My phone buzzed during dessert. A text from an unknown number. "Mom, it's me. I got a new phone. Please, we need to talk. Everything is falling apart." I showed the message to Donald, who read it with the same expression he might use to examine a particularly unpleasant insect. "What do you want to do?" he asked quietly. "Nothing," I said. "There's nothing left to say." But that wasn't entirely true. There was one more thing I wanted Kevin to understand. Later that evening, after the celebration had wound down and Donald had driven me back to my apartment, I was moving in with him the following week. I sat down at my computer and typed a response to my son's desperate text. "Kevin, you're right that everything is falling apart. Your career, your marriage, your reputation, all of it built on the lie that you're a good man. But here's what you need to understand. This isn't happening to you. This is happening because of you. Every consequence you're facing is the direct result of your own choices. You chose Helen's vanity over my pain. You chose your image over my reality. You chose comfort over character. Now you're learning what those choices cost." I paused, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. The old Dakota, the one who'd spent decades making excuses for her son's selfishness, wanted to soften the blow. But that Dakota was dead, buried under years of neglect and betrayal. "I'm getting married next month to a man who understands what family actually means. His daughters have shown me more love in 6 months than you've shown me in 6 years. His grandchildren call me Grandma Dakota and fight over who gets to help me in the garden. I have found my real family, and you're not part of it. I attached a photo from the evening, all of us around the dinner table, laughing and happy, my engagement ring clearly visible as I raised my glass in a toast. Don't contact me again. I have nothing more to say to you, and you've proven you have nothing to offer me. Live with your choices, Kevin. I'm finally living with mine. I hit send before I could change my mind. My phone rang within minutes. Kevin, of course. I declined the call and blocked the number. Then I called Cora to tell her the news about my engagement. It's about damn time, she said. When's the wedding? Next month. Small ceremony, just family. Good. You're real family. Real family. The phrase that had once cut so deeply now felt like a badge of honor. Over the following weeks, as I prepared to move in with Donald and plan our simple wedding, the reports about Kevin's downfall continued to trickle in through the grapevine of neighbors and social media connections. Stella had filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, but everyone knew the truth. Her family's money came with strings, and those strings didn't include supporting a husband whose reputation was in ruins. Helen, it turned out, had been the one pushing hardest for the separation, telling her daughter that she deserved better than a failed man who can't even take care of his own mother. The irony was perfect. Helen, whose cosmetic surgery had started this entire cascade of consequences, was now the one demanding that Stella abandon Kevin in his time of need. The woman who'd benefited from his misplaced priorities was the first to throw him away when those priorities cost him everything. Kevin had moved into a studio apartment in San Jose, a 45-minute commute from his old life in Palo Alto. He'd found work as a contractor for a small tech company, making a fraction of his previous salary. The house hadn't sold, and the mortgage payments were eating through what remained of his savings. I felt nothing hearing these updates. No satisfaction, no guilt, no urge to reach out and offer comfort. Kevin had made his choices, and now he was living with them. Exactly the way I'd lived with the consequences of trusting him to be the son I'd raised him to be. The difference was that I'd found people who actually deserved my trust. People who showed up, who stayed, who understood that love was demonstrated through action rather than declared through empty words. 3 days before my wedding, I received one final message from Kevin. Not a text this time, but a handwritten letter delivered to my old apartment building, forwarded by the postal service to Donald's address. Donald brought it to me without comment, but I could see the concern in his eyes. "Do you want me to stay while you read it?" he asked. "No," I said. "This is something I need to finish alone." But I was wrong about that too. I opened Kevin's letter in Donald's kitchen, standing by the window that overlooked the garden where I'd soon be planting roses. The handwriting was shakier than I remembered, desperate in its urgency. "Mom, I know you don't want to hear from me, but I'm begging you to read this. I've lost everything. Stella is gone. The house is gone. My career is destroyed. I'm living in a studio apartment and working for people who used to be my subordinates. Everyone I thought was my friend has turned their back on me. I know I made mistakes. I know I hurt you, but I never meant for any of this to happen. I was trying to keep everyone happy, trying to balance everything, and I made the wrong choices. I see that now. Mom, you're all I have left. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but please don't abandon me the way I abandoned you. I'm your son. That has to count for something. I heard you're getting married. I'm happy for you, truly I am. But it doesn't change the fact that I'm your blood, your only child. We can work through this. We can fix this. Please call me. Please give me one chance to make this right. I love you, Kevin." I read it twice, waiting for some flicker of the maternal instinct that had driven me to sacrifice everything for this man, waiting for the urge to protect him, to forgive him, to offer him the comfort he was begging for. Nothing came. Instead, I felt the same cold clarity that had sustained me through months of watching his world crumble. Kevin was still lying, even to himself. He hadn't made mistakes. He'd made deliberate choices that revealed his true character. He wasn't sorry for hurting me. He was sorry for the consequences of hurting me. And most telling of all, he was still trying to manipulate me with blood ties and guilt, still expecting me to save him from the mess he'd created. still believing that being my son entitled him to forgiveness he hadn't earned. I folded the letter and walked to Donald's fireplace. The paper caught quickly, curling and blackening until nothing remained but ash. When Donald found me there an hour later, staring into the dying flames, he didn't ask what the letter had said. He simply sat beside me and took my hand. "Are you all right?" "I'm perfect," I said, and meant it. The wedding took place the following Saturday in Sarah's backyard, the same place where Donald had proposed. It was everything Kevin's expensive, magazine-worthy wedding to Stella hadn't been. Intimate, genuine, and filled with people who actually cared about the couple getting married. I wore a simple cream-colored dress and carried a bouquet of roses from Donald's garden. Sarah and Emma served as my matrons of honor, while the grandchildren acted as flower girls and ring-bearers with varying degrees of success. The youngest, 3-year-old Amy, threw her petals with such enthusiasm that she emptied her basket before reaching the altar, then turned to the guests and announced, "I throwed all the flowers." Everyone laughed, including me. When was the last time I'd laughed at a wedding? At my own son's ceremony, I'd spent the entire day feeling like an outsider, watching Kevin perform the role of happy groom while treating me like an embarrassing relic from his past. Here, I was the center of attention in the best possible way. Every speech mentioned how lucky Donald was to have found me, how I'd brought joy back into his life, how our love story proved that it was never too late for a new beginning. "To Dakota and Donald," said Mike, raising his glass for the final toast of the evening, "for showing us that family isn't just about who you start with, it's about who you choose to finish with." Choose to finish with. The words echoed in my mind as I looked around at these faces, these people who'd chosen me as surely as I'd chosen them. After the ceremony, as we cleaned up the backyard and prepared for Donald and me to leave for our honeymoon in Napa Valley, Sarah pulled me aside. "Dakota, I want you to know something. Dad hasn't been this happy since before Mom got sick. You saved him in ways you probably don't even realize." "He saved me too," I said. "I know. That's what makes this so beautiful." We were interrupted by Emma's oldest son, who came running up with his phone in his hand. "Grandma Dakota, someone's been trying to call you all day. The phone keeps buzzing in your purse." I'd forgotten about my phone entirely, caught up in the joy of the day. When I checked it, I found 17 missed calls from Kevin's blocked number and 3 from numbers I didn't recognize. The voicemails told the story. Kevin had gotten more desperate as the day wore on, calling from friends' phones when he realized I'd blocked him, leaving increasingly frantic messages. "Mom, please, I saw the wedding photos on Facebook. You look beautiful, and I'm happy for you, but I need to talk to you. Mom, it's me again. I know you're busy with your wedding, but I'm in real trouble here. Stella's lawyers are taking everything. I might lose my apartment. Mom, please just give me 5 minutes. 5 minutes to explain everything. I know I can make you understand." The final message, left just an hour earlier, was different. His voice was flat, emotionless, defeated. "I get it now, Mom. You're never going to forgive me. You've got your new family, and I'm not part of it. I just want you to know that I realize what I lost. Not just your money or your help, but you. I lost my mother, and it's my fault. I hope you're happy with your new life. I really do. Goodbye." I saved the message, not out of sentiment, but as evidence. Evidence that Kevin finally understood the cost of his choices, that the consequences had reached their intended target, that justice had been served completely. Donald appeared at my elbow. "Everything all right?" "Everything's perfect," I said, deleting the missed call notifications. "Just some spam calls." We left for Napa the next morning, Donald driving while I watched the California landscape roll past the windows. Somewhere behind us, Kevin was probably sitting in his studio apartment, finally understanding what it felt like to be abandoned by the person who was supposed to love you unconditionally. I felt no urge to call him back, no maternal instinct to comfort him in his despair. Those feelings had died the day he chose Helen's facelift over my hip surgery. What remained was the satisfaction of the equation balanced, a debt paid in full. 3 months later, I heard through Cora that Kevin had moved to Portland, taking a job with a startup that specialized in something called reputation management. The irony was perfect. A man who'd destroyed his own reputation now helped others salvage theirs. I also heard that Stella had married a venture capitalist she met at a charity auction, someone wealthy enough to satisfy Helen's requirements for a son-in-law. The wedding photos showed Helen prominently featured, her surgically enhanced face beaming as she posed with her new, adequately rich son-in-law. Some people never learn, but that wasn't my problem anymore. So that's my story. The story of how I learned that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, that sacrifice doesn't create gratitude, and that sometimes the only way to save yourself is to stop trying to save people who don't want to be saved. Kevin made his choices, and I made mine. He chose image over substance, comfort over character, convenience over compassion. I chose to stop enabling him, stop protecting him from consequences, stop pretending that his selfishness was somehow my fault. Did I destroy my son's life? No. I simply stopped hiding the truth about who he really was. I stopped being complicit in his lies, stopped allowing him to use me as a prop in his performance of being a good man. The world did the rest. I'm 73 now, living in a house filled with laughter and grandchildren who call me every day just to say hello. Donald and I tend our garden together, travel when we feel like it, and fall asleep every night knowing we're surrounded by people who would show up for us no matter what. Kevin is 43, alone, and finally learning what I knew all along, that love isn't something you deserve simply by existing. It's something you earn through your actions, your choices, your willingness to sacrifice for others the way they've sacrificed for you. Some lessons come too late to matter. His did, and I sleep just fine with that. Now, tell me, what would you do if you were in my place? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from.